All right, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. It's good to have everybody here. I think we have 13 participants now, and it's good that we could have you guys join us. We're grateful you could make the time to join us. We're going to make sure that the hour or so we have this conversation for every minute of it is worth your time. So again, thank you so much for joining us. My name is Yao Sompa, and I'll be basically coordinating the discussion throughout the time. So once again, thank you for joining us. As the notice, when we're basically going to deal with something quite interesting, we're going to say learning to live with coronavirus. Like clearly, it would appear no one wants to live with the virus, but the conversations are going to center around how can we readjust life in order, as enterprises and as individuals, as companies and as individuals, how can we structure our life such that we can deal with the effects and the consequences of the virus. So let's just start. So again, for the purposes of credibility and things like that, my name is Samuel Yao Sompawatre. I'm going to be the facilitator. I have a natural science. I have risk and finance. I have a law degree, and I'm information security certified, both lead implementer and lead auditor, and I'm also a certified master. And I am a lawyer. I'm also a member of the Institute of Directors Ghana. So basically, in terms of a bit of credence, so we can have this discussion. The discussion is going to be basically in 4 parts. So we're going to start by trying to understand. These are basic facts that are obvious to all of us. So the conversation will be exactly what is the COVID situation as of yesterday, and what are the sentiments around it. And then we'll have a brief discussion about recovery. How do we, if we're intending as businesses to roll back and go back to normal as we know it, what are some of the things we should pay attention to? And then the third section will be dealing with incidences. As we roll back, how prepared will we be to deal with issues that come up? And so what are some of the issues that are likely to come up and how do we deal with it? And the last part, which we'll be dealing with, how do we make sure that our business are assured, and assurance, how do we guarantee that we're doing the things we set out to do? And then we would have some expectations of what the future is likely to be. Let me most of the things we do intended towards one end, and the end is pretty simple, which is transformation. And so we seek the transformation. Anybody who is joined in, our key goal remains one, which is how can we transform a bit of all the things we think of and how can we do things differently. So transformation is definitely at the center of everything we do today. Feel free to contribute to the discussions, and I am definitely sure we will have a good and productive discussion. Okay, so just to set up the conversation, I remember in our last month's edition, as many as remember, the graph on top happens to be the status of the coronavirus globally, according to the John Hopkins. So you can see the world was almost getting red, but most part of Africa was still pretty dotted. Not bold balloons, but slight dots. Now, if you see the nature of it as it was yesterday, you can see that South America, for example, has increased in terms of its balloons and even in the weight of the balloons. If you look at Africa, Africa has also gotten a bit more spots of red. Europe has gotten a bit more clusters. Over the last 1 month, we had this discussion. Now, the big question is, as it relates to us in Ghana, we're told that as of yesterday, the total case count is about 7,303, of which about 2,412 have recovered, 34 deaths. But as I always like to do before we set up the conversation, let's lay some important facts. So globally, as at the last time we had this conversation, which is March 22nd, global infection was about 337,707, and the global infection as at that's 22nd of March, and then as at 22nd of April, when we had this conversation, the global infection was about 2.5 million, which was about 666% jump from what it was a month before. As at yesterday, the global infection is about 5.6 million, which is about 117% jump from what it was the previous month. Clearly, we can see that the rate of jump is reduced, but the numbers are still growing. That is the global figures. When you come to the deaths, as of March, we had global deaths of 14,000. As at the last time we had this conversation, there was about 180,000 people dead. And then as of yesterday, the number of people dead are about 348,000. So again, the rate of jump from between March and April was about 1,000%, but between April and May is about 93%. So yes, it is still on the rise, but at a reducing rate. The global mortality rate is still about 6 to 7%. So usually out of 100 people that get it, about 6 or 7 people are likely to die. But I always say the numbers may sound statistics, but the 6 or 7 people globally are families. They are people behind the numbers. When you come to Ghana specifically, as at 22nd April, when we had this conversation, the numbers were 1,154 compared to the previous month, which was March, which was about 16. And then if you compare it to the count as at today in Ghana, we have 7,303, which is about 532% increase from what it was last month. Total death rate has increased also about 277%. Now, I'd like to state the fact as it is so that we can place the conversations having in context. So two things are pretty obvious who globally have been affected, and it's still clear that the virus, the nature of the virus is that it's still increasing, though in some places at a reducing rate. The virus is still infecting people, and the likelihood of death globally still remains about 6 to 7%. But there is an interesting part, an interesting observation I'm sure participants may have made as well. In as much as the science still shows that the numbers are increasing, it appears that we all probably have gotten to a place where we don't care as much as we cared last month or the month before. Whether because we're getting a bit more tired, or this, in terms of how it's disrupting our sociology, we're just fatigued and we just want to go on with our lives. So clearly there is still a virus, but sociologically there is still there's an observation that people are getting a bit more tired and people are reverting to normal as though the virus doesn't exist. Now that is interesting because it is upon this observation that we're discussing that if indeed the virus is still around and indeed humanity is still finding ways around it, how can we contribute in that way? And so today, basically what we're going to do is to have a discussion as to how to help people, especially companies who are seeking to roll back and have a normal business. How can we help in contributing to that rollback a bit more and make it a bit more safer for people? As we said from the last conversation, people's life are definitely to be prioritized. So at all points in time, we should prioritize human life. But we said from the last discussion, and I'm highlighting this because it's important to connect to today's discussion. We said that for organizations, a bit of things are important. And we said that everything the organization does is to, and as we did the other time, we start from the right. So we read from the right to the left. We're reading backwards. If you see the graph, we're interpreting it from the right towards the left. So we're saying that every organization is set up to give product, services, organizational objectives. And so we're set up for a certain end. And then in order to do that, we go for licensing and business permits and things like that. And so we play a certain regulatory context. And then we lay down a certain process in order to build systems on those processes. And then we employ people who execute the processes in the systems in order to obey the rules and the regulations so that we can give the output we have. And then we're also careful to say that because business is disrupted in this sense, continuity and resilience means that we're flexible. So in order to make sure that going forward and how we deal with this virus, the admonishment was that we need to be prudent, which meant that we need to be flexible and we need to embed processes. We need to be modular, create businesses in smaller bits such that we can have full control over it. And we should have multiple perspectives from different angles and build redundancies into the process. I would recommend that you get the previous recording so that you can have a full view of the discussions. But specifically for today, if you're a business owner and you're seeking to roll back, if you're an employee and you're required to go back to work, this is where the conversation is. And this is how we intend to contribute to that rollback. As your employer wants a full-scale business, or as an employer, you're deciding to have a full business. The first thing we like to say is that before you roll back, it will be important to do what we call a business impact assessment for your recovery process. And so 3 quick things to pay attention to before you roll back. The first one is understand that as a business, you work with processes, but not all processes are equally important in terms of its contribution to the output. So the first thing you need to understand is if you're a business owner and you're seeking to roll back business, and if you're being called to life as it was, the first thing we all should do is that we should understand what is critical, and criticality is measured solely on the effect on the objective. So what do we intend to achieve and what is critical? We're saying that in terms of recovery, in deciding what is critical, ask yourself, how easy or what is the probability of recovery of that process? So how easy is it to recover? So let's say, let's use a typical retailer who has multiple branches. So let's say I have a shop in Medina, I have a shop in Ashaiman, I have a shop all over the place, and I want to start opening all my shops. The big question we're saying is that before you decide to open all your shops, let's have a conversation. Ask yourself, what is the objective? If the objective is that you want to make $1 million by the close of the year, that is your business objective. Ask yourself, which of the processes or which of the shops are most important in terms of contribution? And so understand what the contributions are and which of the processes that leads to that objective is most critical. And we're saying that criticality is measured by understanding the probability of recovery. How easy is it to recover? And if you do not recover, what is the cost? So typically, if I don't open my Ashaiman branch because I make 50% of my income from Ashaiman, I would be impaired. So then, but it is not easy to open Ashaiman because there are a lot of people there and those considerations. So the first consideration for anybody deciding to roll back is please understand, out of all the processes you have, which one is most critical? And in answering that, ask yourself, how is it to recover that process, and what is the impact if you do not recover that process? What that process analysis gives you is that it helps you to understand your recovery option. So you have an option to open this process, or open the shop in Medina, or open the shop in Ashaiman, or have an alternative enabled solution. So if, for example, we're saying that it is, if you do not open your Ashaiman branch, it is a significant cost. The question is, can you then have an alternative? Can you create an online portal and hire a dispatch who deliver the things to your customers at Ashaiman without opening the shop? So then you begin to think about alternative enable. But the second thing, apart from answering the question of what is most critical for you as a business person, or for you as an individual, ask the question of what resources are required. Now that question is important because yes, you may want to open everything, but we know that the coronavirus has impacted cash flows. We know that it has affected activity ranges. We know that business is impaired. So ask yourself, how much resource do I have to obtain what we call a realistic recovery effort? So how much people do I have? How much money do I have? What is my budgetary allocation? And how many people are still willing to come to work? How many people, how many IT infrastructure do I have to enable the alternate? And so the conversation about resource requirement and the budgetary allocations helps you reassign. So if you, for example, say in our Ashaiman example, if you say that your Ashaiman is the most important part of the process and you're opening Ashaiman, but you understand that realistically, you do not have the number of people who would go and work at Ashaiman, the question becomes then, how then do you prioritize, which becomes our third consideration for anybody who is seeking to recover or open up business to normal life. So what we're saying that sequence recovery, build the roadmap by understanding the risk profiles of each of the processes or each of the things we're engaged in. So yes, we understand that we all want probably to go to normal life, and we understand that indeed there's a certain social fatigue, but the central point being made is that don't open everything at once, because indeed the science still shows that there is a virus that is still spreading. And yes, the numbers in Ghana, the death rate in Ghana may look like less than 1%, but as I say, the 34 people are still, or the 30-something people are still families, they are still parents, they are still, they are people, they are individuals, they are human beings behind that numbers. And so before you open, understand what is the nature of those profiles you carry, and then what is a roadmap, sequence, in terms of processes that matter. So that's the first thing we're saying. Yes, there is a certain certain appetite to go back to normal life, but let us not go in wholesale. Let us sequence based on the importance or the criticality and the resource requirements of the processes we have. So that's the first thing we're saying today. Now, the second thing we're saying is that for any business, whether it's an SME, whether it's a big business, whether it's a one-man shop, whatever it is, it has now become very important that once you decide to sequence your recovery, it is extremely important that you build teams that would have a specific focus on this pandemic. In normal terms, we say it's the business continuity committee or the business continuity team. Now, it is important to align a team of people who would at least have a view as to what is the daily happenings in the global issue, because this virus is fast changing. So have a team of people who has a focus on what is the current status, what is changing, in order to make swift decisions. Usually, that team should comprise of somebody who is high in executive, somebody who is high up and can make final decisions. The most important person on this list, I would say, is that have a recovery coordinator, COVID recovery coordinator. That person is supposed to coordinate all the entire business processes, and in order to make sure that the interest of all the stakeholders are at least brought forth as we seek to recover. That coordinator should work with the business continuity team for companies that are well established. This is this is known, that you would have a business continuity strategy and a plan. And in that strategy and a plan, there is a continuity team. But build that coordinator you are appointing for the purposes of this COVID recovery, such that that person liaises or works with a continuity team, with technology, because most of the alternative are technology-based and application-based. That person should work closely with technology and applications and databases and process optimizations and communication team in order to coordinate the recovery such that it is sequenced and seamless. So the first thing we said is that, yes, the social anxieties are dying and we want to revert to normal life. Yes, but before we do that, let's understand the criticality of the processes. And as we understand the criticality of the processes, let's sequence our rollback in order of merit and allocations of resources. Now, once we do that, the most important thing is that, okay, so now we've decided to roll back. We know the processes or the branch outlets or things like that we're rolling back. We know the resource requirements we have. We understand the team. So we've appointed somebody who will be responsible for bringing us to date as to the happenings of this virus, and somebody who will coordinate our full recovery. This slide, I think, is one of the most important slides for today, and I would really like for us to pay attention. Now, usually, in the normal sense of business, as in when business happens, we usually have what we call incidents, and incidents are disruptions. Incidents are events that happen to take us away from the objective. So a product fails, a customer complains, a supplier does not deliver, we do not meet our budget, research and development, we have compliance issues, we have logistic issues. So the first thing we're saying is that before you recover, yes, understand criticality and sequence. Yes, appoint somebody to be responsible. But the third thing we're saying is that understand the disruptions you're likely to face in a full sequence rollover. Note that in the delivery of my business, on a normal case, and so the green line you see is a normal case, for example. So in a normal day before coronavirus came, what were some of the issues you were having as a company, or you were having as a SME or as a shop owner? What were the nature of the incidents you were faced with? So were they majority in terms of evaluation, the significant issues we're faced with? Were the product and channel issues significant? Were the customer issues routine disruptions? And please, in interpreting this slide, we've categorized the nature of all incidents that come, or the nature of all issues organizations can have, or incidents organization can have as normal or routine disruptions, which are low risk. They are disruptions, but they don't cause much harm. And then we're saying we have significant disruptions. They can be very problematic, and they are critical disruptions. We're saying that understand before coronavirus, what was the normal sequence of your incidents? Which ones were critical? Which ones were routine? Which ones were significant, right? And if you note the nature of the issues you have, the question is, if in this era of coronavirus and as we're seeking to roll back, which of the issues or which of these incidents are you expecting to escalate? And so are you expecting product and channel issues to escalate? Are you expecting them to move from significant to critical? Are you expecting customer complaints and relationship issues to move from the lower end of significant to the higher end of significant? Are you expecting supplier issues because of the issues of force majeure and frustration of contract to move from one of the routine disruptions to significant issues? Are you expecting that your budget constraints will move downwards because probably you're a data service company and people are buying a bit more data? Are you expecting that your research issues will also increase? And so understand, and this is only an example, but then the moment you begin to understand that, okay, as I'm opening up, the nature of these issues will escalate, the volatility between the normal case scenario and if you open up, the nature of the disruptions you have will tell you what to put in place
before you open up. So understand in the normal course of business, what is the nature of disruptions you face, and if you roll back, what will be the nature of issues you will be faced with. I want to understand that. Let's move forward. Now, we're saying that understand the nature of the issues you're faced with. So whether or not they are low risk, they are medium risk, or high risk. But let me share 5 golden rules as we seek to roll back full, and how do we deal with incidents as business people, as employees in the workplace. The first thing is that please have a designated person who will take all incidents coming to organization. I'm sure some of us are listening. We don't even have a profile of the incidents that we encounter in the normal day or in the normal course of business. We don't understand the nature of the incidents we're faced with. This would be an opportunity to designate something in the company, whether it's a one-man shop, it's a small business, or it's a large corporation. Have somebody designated to take incidents, somebody who would record all incidents coming through the organization. Some call it the risk register, some call it the incident log, some call it the event register, whatever you call it. Have somebody designated who will collect all nature of incidents or disruptions that happens to the business. Now, once that person does, please lay down a process such that people can report. And so send an email to all your staff and say that as we come back to business, if you have any issues pertaining to coronavirus and resource and things like that, report to person A, who has been designated as the COVID coordinator or the person responsible for recovery, and is the same person who is responsible for coordinating incidents. So have a person designated, but also have a process for people to report those incidents. And the third thing is that determine the minimum reportable variables. So what should people report? Should they report the day of the incident, the nature of the incident, the impact, the root cause, what is it likely to cause? Now, it's important to help with resolution, and it's important to help with investigations as well. So in the process, determine what should people report. The fourth golden rule will be, please, when an incident comes, people want to see something done about issues. So if people report issues to you as a business owner or as a business manager, please prepare or have a corrective action plan. Work on those issues coming, or at least be seen to be working on them. And so have a plan to correct those issues and use that corrective or learning curve to prevent your business as and when we roll back to normal life. So as and when we encounter issues going forward, that should help us redress those issues and help us prevent similar issues going forward. So these are the 5 golden rules. I'll say. First, understand the nature of the issues coming, as we saw in the previous slide. Understand whether it's routine in terms of low risk incident. Is it significant as a medium risk event, or is a high risk issue? And then approach it in terms of getting a designated person who deal with the issues, have a laid down process for reporting, determine what should be reported, and then correct it. Have a plan to correcting those issues, and use those plans as a learning curve to make your business better. Now, the bigger conversation, once you have circumscribed how to deal with issues as and when we roll back, is the question of how do I then assure, or how then do I make sure that people are doing the right thing as a business? So assurance is basically the structures we put in place in a business to make sure that everybody hired is doing what they were hired to do. All of us come into an enterprise with a view to achieving a certain objective. The assurance are the people who are hired, and their job is to make sure that all of us are doing our job. Now, the typical modern day assurance structures is what we call the 3-tier lines of defense. So on a normal day, businesses are working in accordance with the structures of managing or assuring their business. So there's a first line, which is usually internal control, and the management controls built into policies. And so if you're, for example, a typical bank, the teller or the head of operations has a policy they work with. In that policy is a management control. In that policy, there's a certain label, say you do that, and once you do that, then you pass it on to a second person who will do that. So that policy lays down a certain process embedded with which is a management control. And there are internal controllers who sit within business to make sure that the management controls are enforced. So that's in a typical business, that's the first line. And then the second line usually are people who do inspection and spot checks, like the financial control unit, who check on everything before it's approved, or your head of security, your risk management, your service quality, your inspection and compliance team are usually your second line of defense, who enforce the activities of the first line. And you have a third line, who is an independent person, who is the internal auditor. Beyond them is the external auditor and your regulator. So on a normal course of business, this is the structures put in place for assurance. Of course, the board audit committee sits on top and the management sits there. Now, as we intend to roll back, one thing that is important is that most people are working from home. And so the second line of defense is becoming pretty weak. So if businesses are working from home, who are you going to inspect? Will you go to people's house to say, I beg, let me inspect you, what you're doing? So inspection will not, you won't go to people's house and say, I want to inspect what you're doing. Or compliance, as it were, because we're working from home and there are flexible routines, the second line appears to be getting weaker. Now, most of the onus of assurance will fall to management control. So the first advice in terms of assurance would be that please make sure your management controls at this point is extremely tight. Review your management controls and make sure, and because management controls are put in by second line assurance, please make sure that your management controls at this point, it's airtight, because the person working from home would most likely be the final person, except we come back to normal and get an auditor reviewing probably next year or next 2 years or whatever the time sequencing will allow. So at this point, what we really need to do as assurance people is to make sure that our policies and our processes and our management controls are airtight. Now, the second thing we can do with regards to assurance is to make sure that there are a lot of analytics and reports. So because people would be working remotely, it then becomes an important conversation to see what people are doing also digitally. So management controls and audit review should be built into the systems people are using to work. Of course, the conversation on how it impinges on privacy and things like that is a conversation for another day. And what we're saying is that now assurance officers must take a different form, which is beyond just the physical controls,
Alright. What has the weather changed? I think it is.
Okay, so guys, I'm sorry. I think we had some network issues, so the link went off. It's good. So as before the link went off, one of the things I was saying was that we should, and we're very sorry for that. I don't know where the link dropped, but I would just go back just briefly in order to recap. So we're saying that assurance basically is three-tiered in a normal business, and in sequencing business such that people who make sure that we all do the things we do and do the things we do well. There is a first line, a second line, and a third line. And that sequence basically helps us. And in times like this, we have to strengthen our management control. And then we'll have to make sure that we're building analytics in order to collect reports. As I said, if you're an internal auditor at this time, probably people are working from home. It doesn't mean there's nothing for the internal auditor to do. What it means is that we can actually enable analytics in order to collect data and in order to remotely assess what people are doing. The other thing worth noting at this point is that 4 quick takeaways before we wrap up. Now, so the conversation as we've had it up until now is to say that the signs of the virus is still here and the virus is still rising, but there's a certain sense of social fatigue. And we've also said that all organizations use people, processes, systems, and work in a certain regulatory context in order to produce the outputs they have. And continuity and resilience basically require that we are flexible, we embed our processes, we're modular, we're diverse in our views of what the impacts are, and we build redundancies into the business. We have also said that before we roll back or before anybody rolls back, we should pay attention to which events or which processes are critical to us, how much resources we have, and then sequence in terms of priorities and sequence recovery. And then we said that once we understand what is critical to us and resources we have, let us appoint somebody who will be responsible for coordinating our recovery. We call him the COVID recovery coordinator. We also said that understand your normal day issues. Before we had coronavirus, what was the nature of the issues that you were faced with as an organization? And then after COVID, or when we seek to recover, what are the major issues that you're likely to face? And then that should help you put some things we call the golden rules in place. Once you understand the nature of the risk, designate someone to collect the incidents, lay a process for reporting, determine what should be reported, and then build a corrective plan and use that for your learning. And we also said that in order to ensure that we're doing what we say we will do. Usually we have 3 people or 3 lines, and in this time, inspection and things like that are weak. So make sure that your management controls, which is the policies built in, are airtight, and you're using analytics and reporting a bit more as assurance officers. Now let's have quick takeaways before we end today's webinar. 4 things to take away. Now, assuming business goes back to normal, so let's say the president speaks to us over the weekend and he says that we should all go back to normal. What is the implications? 4 quick things. The first one is that what we're likely to see is that, so option 1, which is the best case scenario, people who have the virus, who may not have been tested and quarantined and things like that, will go around and spread it. And so we're likely to get the virus spread around. Now, we're told that there's something called herd immunity. So if 60 to 70% of people have the virus, it doesn't become a pandemic anymore. So 60 to 70% of the people get the coronavirus, which means that the community is said to have attained a certain natural immunity. And so it becomes endemic. So that's your first case. So your first case scenario is that the virus moves around and everybody gets it without knowing, or people who will get sick, people who die will die, and then we'll get about 60 to 70% of herd immunity, and then we move on with our lives because we would have attained a certain natural immunity. Now, the second case scenario is that we do not attain the herd immunity. The viruses, as we know, is novel, evolves, and we get second waves and case rebounds, and then the social anxiety, which we're losing, comes back, and then we prolong recovery. So we have to go back into quarantine and things like that, and then we prolong the whole cycle. So we get social anxiety coming back, cases rise and death toll and things like that. Right? We may bounce back. So that's our second case scenario. Our third case is that businesses does not actually revert back to normal as we knew it, but we begin to get a new normal, which is online enabled business model. So everybody begins to find alternative ways in delivering their objectives without exactly opening back society as it was, at least for a long time, or at least for some time, where we have a vaccine or a cure or things like that. But the final thing is that we all know that the social cultural changes will be real. At least we know that weddings may revert back to glam and glamour, but we may not have it as private funerals may actually become a thing, because now we know that holding funerals in smaller groups and being effective probably saves us time and money. So probably, and we're likely to see our social cultural arrangements change. We may not revert to shaking hands anytime soon. People may not shake hands anytime soon. Now, I'm highlighting this because it may have implications for your business, and so pay attention to some of the social cultural changes that are likely to happen and what will be the impact on your business. So these are 4 case scenarios, and please, as you model a rollback scenario, please pay attention to some of it. So in ending, as we roll back, the normal sequence of business continuity usually says that you plan and you prepare, you respond and you recover. But as we know it, there is something we call counterfactuals, things against facts. Others call it the black swan. There are things that do not likely happen in a long time, but with significant effect that happen. Usually in planning business continuity, we do not pay attention to these counterfactuals and in these extreme events. The recommendation is that business continuity should become a part of every business building resilience going forward. And so that my advice would be, as we go, understand the risks you're faced with in terms of disruptions, how would you respond to it? If even it's a thought process, as a business owner, think through, okay, what do I do make money? What do I do as a schedule of activity? If something happens that disrupts my business, how will I respond to it? What will I do? And document that thought process. And as we document that thought process, would be making business continuity or counterfactual thinking a part of our business, which is necessary in building resilience. Now, actually, I like to tell stories, so let me end with this story. Albert Camus is said to be one of the youngest persons who ever received the Nobel laureate at the age of 44. He received the laureate for literature. Now, he has an interesting essay, quite a long essay called The Myth of Sisyphus. Now, Sisyphus, I'm telling the story for the purposes of the discussions we're having. Sisyphus is a myth here, a Greek myth. And so it's a story that is told from ancient Greeks. It's a Greek story. But Camus is said made the story popular. Now, the story said that Sisyphus was a king who was very wise or shrewd, who tricked the gods. So some say that he was able to tie death itself. Some said that he made his city so rich that the gods were jealous. And so at a point, the gods cursed him with a fate. And the fate of the gods was such that Sisyphus will carry a boulder, which is the big rock we see him push. And you push the rock over a mountain. And just when the rock is about to hit the top, it would fall all the way back. And Sisyphus' weight is to go down again and push the boulder all the way. And he's cursed by the gods to do it all through eternity. Now, Camus makes an interesting observation, and I like to quote specifically. He says that the workman of today works every day in his life at the same task. And this fate is no less absurd, but it is tragic only at rare moments when it becomes conscious. You may want to liken what we're seeing. I know most of us had done great work at pushing things that were almost impossible. We had done difficult work. And just as when we thought that it was over, the boulder seems to have rolled all the way back to the beginning. And so we have to go all the way down the mountain and push these difficult things we have done. We may have gotten businesses, we may have been closing deals, we may be on the way to a new master's or a PhD or a graduate, something, or marriage, something. And just when we thought it was over, it appears the fate of the gods is to push the boulder all the way back. Now, it is interesting that and quoting Camus again, he says that it is during the return. And so it is times like this when everything seems to have fallen back to course 90 and we have to do it all over again. That interests him, which is to say that the face of toil, I see the man going back with a heavy measure, the torment. The point being made is that Camus advises, and I think we can have a discussion on Camus on philosophy and existentialism on a different day. We can have the conversations on policy and what this philosophy means on a different day. But the bigger lesson is that we need to come to a place, and that's the word I've highlighted here, which is contented acceptance. We need to come to a place as business people that coronavirus has really brought us to a place where the boulders and the difficult things we did probably have rolled all the way back, and we need to go all the way back to push with hard work again. But we need to come to a place where we can be content, at least to do the work all over again. It sounds absurd, but the conclusion is that, yes, indeed, our fate may be absurd, but we can actually be happy. And he compares Sisyphus to Oedipus, which is the adapted work, The Gods Are Not to Blame. Somebody who was born said he will marry the mother, and kill the father. In the end, Camus makes a very interesting thing, which says that he concludes by saying that all is well indeed. One must imagine Sisyphus happy. And so the point is that, yes, we may be going back to push the boulder again, but indeed, the conclusion of all the matter is that all is well. And indeed, yes, it may be doing the work all over again, but we can truly come to a place where we can accept that doing the work all over again, we can't be happy rebuilding. We can't be happy reconstructing. We can't be happy building our business all over again. And then the advice given, if we're careful, to build in a structure that takes into account the issues we have and builds in the structure of reporting and assurance, indeed, all can be well. So before we take in questions and things like that, I want to emphasize Innovari has a platform which is called the Risk Africa Summit, which is a summit basically for a platform to make risk management a key part of management conversation, a key part of building resilience in our local businesses and in corporate Ghana. And so please look out for this Risk Summit. You can go to the risksummitafrica.com and check prior events. You can also reach out to the email address for information about this. We're fortunate and privileged enough to be one of the speakers from the previous years. So you can get the slides for the other and the videos of the other and absolutely inform your decision in joining this year. But let's wrap up. So we've said that we know we're anticipating that businesses will go back to normal, and as businesses go back to normal, we should all understand that social anxiety may be waning, but the scientific evidence still exists. And the fact that the scientific evidence exists means that there's still caution to be had. We can't throw everything, we can't throw caution to the wind. And so we really need to understand that in rolling back, we sequence based on criticality. And as we sequence based on criticality, we should understand the nature of the incidents we're likely to face with. And we looked at the 5 golden rules for which to approach incidents, which is designate somebody responsible for collecting, determine a process for collection of incidents, build a plan to solve and use that plan to make your businesses better. And then once we do that, we should build in a structure of assurance or monitoring such that our management controls and our processes are airtight. But beyond that, our reporting and analytics are on point in order to help us make progress. We've also said here that irrespective of whatever happens, we should understand the sequence of business continuity. And we should begin thinking going forward. The adage that says that plan for the worst, but hope for the best is still true for all of us in our private lives and in our business lives. So we said that going forward, it's important that we all plan and prepare for counterfactuals, which are events that are not likely to happen, but can happen. So even as a thought process, we should ask ourselves, if it does happen, what will we do? So let's think through, okay, this is what I do. And if anything happens to disrupt that which I do, as a thought process, document what you will do so that at the time that the event happens, you at least have a response to what you will do. And then we ended with a story of Sisyphus, which is to say that, yes, coronavirus may have been like the gods, which has cursed the work we have done for years to seem to have rolled back all the way to the bottom of the mountain. But indeed, we can imagine Sisyphus happy, and indeed all is well. So we'll go back and push with all the weights we have, and hopefully, as we push, we can come to a contented state of acceptance, and we can all conclude like Sisyphus, all is well. So if there are any questions, as I say, I write under the name Yao Sompa. I have a few articles out there, so you can check some of the opinions we have. Yao Sompa, you can send us an email. We have a small movement which is called Africa Learn. You can check us Africa_Learn. And also it is important that I state I am an author of 2 books, Fate of System Thinking, which is about resilience, and the story of the failure in our banking industry and how all business people may learn from it. And the second part, the second book, which is about leadership and learning from the entrepreneur, which is the word for somebody who directs a play, Uncle White, how can we all be effective leaders? So those are the 2 books. You can reach out for a copy. It's again, I would like to thank you. We've used exactly. If there are any questions now, you can send it in the chat box, or you can You can ask any questions if there are any. Otherwise, I'd like to thank you for really joining. If there are any questions, you can share it in the chat box, and I'll be glad. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining. We're really grateful. Even when the network failed, you guys still stayed with us. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much. If there are any questions, we'd like to take it. If there are any questions, we'd like to take it. Otherwise, please feel free to reach out to us on any of the social media platforms. We have a YouTube channel as well. Innovari has a YouTube channel, which is Innovari Ghana. We also have Africa Learn on YouTube, so you can join any. We'll share the videos, the recorded videos on. But if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Thank you. Yeah, nice presentation. Thank you very much, Joyce. Kofi says noted with thanks. Okay. So if there is any other question, otherwise I wanna just come to an end, and we want to thank you for staying with us. We hope that as we roll over, indeed, we'll have stronger businesses. Thank you so much, Mausino. She says that nice presentation. And then so we hope that as we roll over, we would organize our businesses such that we have resilient businesses. We would all do businesses a bit more secure, with a bit more resilient, such that things like this do not threaten the whole economy as it has. So we hope that we can be part of the conversation in helping businesses and all of us make sure that we build our personal lives and our business lives a bit more structured to withstand all the difficulties nature and life may throw our way. So thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much. I should recap the slides on BIA. That's from Kofi. So Kofi says the slide on BIA. So the what we said about BIA was so Kofi, what we basically said is okay. So what we said is that understand criticality, processes that are critical based on the probabilities, and then not only the probabilities but the impact of recovery. And as we understand the impact and the criticality, it will help us develop recovery options and then alternative enabled options. And also we should understand our resources and people and systems in order to come to a place of a realistic recovery objective. And then which would allow us to prioritize critical businesses based on the risk profile we have. So basically that is it, Kofi. I hope this answers your question. Paul says, well done, great. Okay, thank you so much, Paul. Are there any other questions we may have? Thank you guys for staying with us. If there are any comments, please feel free to share them. Otherwise, one discussion on incidents and assurance as it pertains to learning to live with coronavirus will be the end. So as and when we roll back and learn, I hope these are two nuggets that will help us build a certain incident, business impact analysis, incident reporting, and assurance models we've discussed today will be helpful to you and your business. So thank you guys for joining again. How did they do this? Yeah, so thank you so much for joining, and we appreciate your love and care for staying tuned. So have a good afternoon. I can see there is no other questions. Thank you.